Hello there. Today we're going to be talking about domain and range, and we're going to be focusing in on discrete graphs. Make sure you take notes as you go and complete the survey that follows the video. So before we begin, let's talk about what domain and range are. The domain represents all of the x values. So when you're doing this on a graph, you ask yourself, how far left does it go to how far right does it go? On the range, it's all the y values. And in this case, you're going to ask, how low does it go to how high does it go? Because the y values are represented on the y-axis, which goes from bottom to top of a graph. So let's take a look at an example. These are a set of points that may or may not be on a graph, and we're going to identify the domain and the range. So the domain represents all of your x values. So in this, we see the x values always written first are 8, 4, and -9. So I'm going to list that out as -9, 4, and 8. And we like to do it in numerical order from lowest to highest, but it does not have to be that way. The range are all the y values, so -6, 3, and 1 are our 3 y values. So we're going to list those out. There's a specific way for us to list this out, and it's called set notation. Set notation is just a way to list a number of values. So for example, if our domain of these set of points would be the numbers 2, 4, 7, and 8, because they are all the x values, we are going to write it using these braces. So as you see, we start with a brace, and we write the domain inside, and we close it like a brace. And so it's kind of like parentheses, just written a little bit differently. The range will be done in the exact same way. So we open a set of braces, we write the numbers 2, 3, 1, and 5, and then we close it. And that would represent set notation, which represent all the ranges. We can do the same thing with the table of values. So when I identify the domain from this, also labeled as D with the colon, we open up the set with a brace, and then we label all, or we include all of the x values. So in this problem is -5, -2, 0, 2, and 6. For the range, it's all the y values. So from here, we're going to identify them as 3, 1, 0, and -4. Do you see how I didn't include both of those 3's? It's not necessary for you to write a number twice. So if you see it written or repeated anywhere, just leave it as a single number. So when we do this, we use set notation with ordered pairs tables and specifically for discrete graphs. So ask yourself, what is a discrete graph? Do we know? Let's go over that real quick. So a discrete graph looks like this. Do you see how the points are essentially all distinct or separate from each other? I have one point in very different areas versus continuous. A continuous graph is ongoing or unbroken. It's the way that you can think of that. Make sure you draw these examples inside your notebook as it's very important to see the difference between the two. But again, you don't have anything, or you might have some broken pieces within discrete, and a continuous graph is never broken. So let's do an example with that of finding the domain and the range. So to find the domain, we're going to look at all the x values of these points. So for example, I have this point here, the x value is 1. The next point over, its x value is 2. And I'm getting that by looking how far over this goes on the x-axis. For the third point, it's going up to 3. This point is 4, 5, and 6. So the domain would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The range, we're now going to look at the y values. So open up a brace. The lowest point, remember we go low to high from here. The lowest point is a -1, so that's my first one. I'm going to work my way up. This is 0 to this point. This point here is 1. The next point is 2. The next point is 3. However, I don't have anything on 4 and 5, so I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to go right to 6. And so these are our domain and our range. Go ahead and hit the pause button, and why don't you try to find the domain and the range of this example. Let's see how you did. So for the domain in this one, again, we're looking at our x values. You should have gotten the numbers 1, 2, and 3 because this is above the number 1, that's the left, most left. This is above the 2, and this is above the 3. The range would be the numbers 2 and 4. This is a repeated value, so we don't need to write it twice, but they line up with the number 2. That's our lowest point, and our highest point is the number 4. So overall, just to remind you, the domain is all of our x values, and the range is all the y values. Set notation is used with our ordered pairs, tables, and those discrete graphs. To use the set notation, we use our braces, which are little squiggly lines. Here's your survey. Please make sure you answer all 3 questions, and we'll see you tomorrow.